welcome back to Mads World. I'm your host Mads, and I hope you've been enjoying the show so far. If you have, please remember to subscribe, rate and review the show, as it's the simplest way to help out. Or find me on social media and tell your friends. This week I'm joined by reigning Miss Great Britain, Charlotte Clemie. Recently crowned as Miss Great Britain, Charlotte spoke proudly as a finalist about her platform Raising Great Brit Men. Having 3 sons, Charlotte wants to encourage other mums to educate their sons and raise a future generation of feminist men. Charlotte was raised in Northern Ireland by 2 feminist mothers and now embraces being a part of an industry that supports women to talk about their passions. Charlotte calls herself a girl's girl. In her 20s, she was successfully cast as the official real-life Barbie for the toy company Mattel. She worked as Barbie for 5 years and travelled across the UK at various events. Charlotte dreamed of one day having a daughter to pass down her Barbie memorabilia to, but it just wasn't to be. Charlotte is now the proud mother of 3 young boys. It was after having her 3rd son that she realised she had a greater power to make a difference to women, and so her platform, Raising Great Brit Men, was born. Charlotte is a proud feminist, and although some might say that's somewhat contradictory as a pageant queen, you don't have to speak to Charlotte for very long to understand why she does what she does. In this episode, we talk about feminism in pageantry, what Charlotte loves most about pageants, where her journey with feminism began, and how we can encourage young people and the next generation to become future feminist leaders. Hello, Charlotte.
Oh, hi, Maddie.
How are you?
I'm thrilled to be on this podcast. What an honour. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for joining me. I've asked you to come on the podcast because you are the current reigning Ms. GB, Miss Great Britain, which is really exciting. And I just wanted you to tell our listeners a little bit more about your journey with Miss and Ms. GB, if you could, just because I find it super fascinating, and it's going to lead into our discussion a bit later about pageantry and feminism and all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah, well, I'm sure like a lot of your listeners are probably thinking, what on earth, are pageants still a thing?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people think that they're dead and buried and don't deserve to be going anymore. But I can assure your listeners that there's a whole new generation of women now who do pageants, and it's very empowering, and it's all women supporting women. And encouraging each other to reach their dreams and goals. And Miss Great Britain launched the categories Ms. GB and Ms. Classic GB a couple of years ago, which opened the competition up to women over the age of 30, right up until whatever age. And I think even just that shows just how much the pageant industry has changed. It's no longer a 20-something white girl with blonde hair, size 0, who wins. It really is all women, all ethnicities, all ages, all shapes and sizes welcome.
You've done so much work in the feminist space, and you've started a platform which we'll get into a little bit later, but I'd love for you to tell me a bit more about your journey with feminism and where this began.
Yeah, well, I am originally from Northern Ireland. I live in England now and have done, for 18 years, which is scary to think that I've been here that long. But I've still got my accent, so I was very pleased when you recognised that straight away.
It's beautiful. I love it.
But yeah, I grew up in Northern Ireland with 2 mums, which was definitely unusual and not the norm, especially when I was growing up. So having such strong feminist roots, it was only natural that I was going to be a feminist myself. So my mum and Mary, her partner, both worked for Women's Aid, which is obviously an organisation that helps and supports women and children who suffer from domestic violence. So my mum's worked for the charity for 30 years. Yeah, at least 30 years. So feminism is really been, right in there, my roots growing up. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the journey with feminism began with myself.
And what do people usually say when you tell them that you're a feminist who does pageants? What's the normal response from people?
Well, I think people in the pageant industry, of course, it's the norm because I'd say all women probably who are doing the pageants nowadays are feminists themselves, or at least I'd like to hope so. But for those people who don't know what a modern day pageant is about, it doesn't surprise me at all that they wouldn't understand it. And I completely see why they would think that. Back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, even when I first started competing, because I've been competing myself since I was 17. So even back then, it was very male dominated judging panels. It was very, it was really pitting women against each other. It wasn't embracing all different types of women. It was very stereotypical and beautiful women that would win. So if people don't realize how it's changed, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever that people would think, how can she be a feminist and still want to do beauty pageants today? So yes, it definitely does raise a few eyebrows. And as I mentioned earlier, of course, my mum, who works for Women's Aid, she works in an all-female organisation. And I think at the beginning, they were a bit like, what on earth what do you mean your daughter is doing pageants? And then actually when mum, really sort of explained what was happening and the, everything that's so good about them today, I think I've, changed their minds, definitely in the office now. And they can see why it works so well.
And what do you love most about pageants?
For me, it really is just celebrating women. And it really is as simple as that. I mean, I don't know any other type of event where you will find women on stage filled with 200 plus other women in a room cheering women on stage. It's just a whole crowd of women cheering, supporting other women. It's not bitchy, it's not catty, it's not what like movies or anything makes out. It's just a lot of women there who are all wanting to make new friends and have new experiences. And for me personally, what I love about pageants is that it gives you a platform and it gives you an opportunity to use your voice. It gives you a really good opportunity to do fundraising. I mean, I've raised over £10,000 in the last couple of years for just various different charities, and Women's Aid being one of them. Funnily enough, during lockdown, I'm a photographer, so during lockdown, I was doing headshots via Zoom, which was not easy. It was horrendous.
Did you have to direct people on Zoom and say, put your hand here? Oh my God.
But of course, during lockdown, it was horrendous for women who were in domestic abuse relationships because the numbers just soared. Being trapped in all day, absolutely isolated. It was just horrendous. So the call centres were getting loads of calls. The refuges were, were running out of spaces. So anyway, I did this headshot event on Zoom and raised quite a bit of charity for Women's Aid. But I was, as great as it was, like, well, you know what technology is like. It was very stressful.
Trying to set up this call earlier, trying to get the headphones and the mic and everything sorted. It's an absolute nightmare. So in saying all of that, do you think that you can be a feminist and do pageants then? I think that's a key thing for our listeners to hear and understand, because I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't have thought that before speaking to you.
Yeah, it's definitely today, 100%. I watched this... what was it I watched recently? That there's a great movie that's been brought out of an event. I think it was when Miss World was in London. It might have been in the 60s, and it was a real movement with a group of feminists who they came in and I think they either threw flour or they did something. And I was watching this movie and honestly, it was sickening how pageants used to be. Like when I think back to how it was, it really, really is awful. Like women were literally treated like cattle. It was mostly men on the judging panel, like I say, and there was a sleaziness about it. It just was nothing that sits within my belief system at all. But like I say now, it really is women supporting other women. And I've made most of my best friends through pageants. And it's just a really welcoming community. I mean, we're a bit of a cult, really. Once you get in and get hooked, that's you. You've got friends for life.
And that's all people really want is connection and to make, like-minded like friendships with like-minded people. And I think some people out there might be thinking, you know, if people were treated like cattle, why would they do it? But it's sort of like, well, why do people upload Instagram photos of themselves? You know, it's sort of, I guess, in the same way that validation and wanting to get involved with something and, you know, making friends, like there's plenty of reasons why.
Yeah, I think probably the easiest way to compare it for somebody saying, but why? I mean, us pageant girls make a joke. I mean, I do think it's funny. I'm not, you know, I'm 36. I've got 3 boys.
Yeah.
Why on earth am I wanting to put on a dress and walk around a stage with people clapping? It is very strange. Don't get me wrong. I'm the first to say it.
When you say it like that.
Like, what is wrong with her? But like I say, it's all the things that go alongside it, talking about my platform, which we'll get into a little bit later. But there's lots of other things that go alongside it. But I think the easiest thing to compare it to is probably people who do either dance competitions, people who do bodybuilding competitions.
Yeah.
You know, kind of having that final. There's a lot that you do prep-wise on the run-up to the final with your community work, charity work, and whatever else. And then the final that people actually watch that night is only one small snippet of the work that's gone in on the run-up. And that's the real celebration of what you've done. So, you know, you do walk on stage, you've got your big hair, you've got your makeup on, but I love that glitz and glamour. And that's something that I'm definitely not ashamed of. I love putting my heels on and getting dressed up. Yes, I think it's a really fun thing, but that's just probably the easiest way to compare it. Is it's no different really than people who do competitions, figure competitions, bodybuilding competitions. It is a competition, and you've got to have the right walk, you've got to have the right outfits, but you've also got to have the right personality. It's not just about beauty.
And how have pageants changed over the years?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, you know, back in the early days, especially when they first started, it was predominantly like organized by men. Whereas now the biggest competitions, well, in fact, all of the competitions in the UK, all the directors are female. I mean, my director, Saffron, you know, she's a businesswoman, and other pageants within the UK, Galaxy is another big one, is ran by another female businesswoman. They're usually now, I'd say all, actually thinking of it, are organised by women for women. And even like the big ones like Miss Universe, the director of Miss Universe is female, whereas back in the day, all very male dominated. And I think even like, which is pretty gross thinking of it. I mean, at one point, Donald Trump was actually, he owned Miss Universe, which says it all. But thankfully now he's gone. And it's a woman in charge, and it is all about empowering other women.
So up next, we're going to chat a little bit about your platform, Raising Great Brit Men. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Yeah. So that's sort of come off the back of you being crowned Ms. GB. And I'm hoping you can tell me a bit more about that, because it's really fascinating concept.
So I am a mum of 3 boys, and I think like a bit of a background is that I actually used to work as the real life Barbie for toy company Mattel, which is random.
Oh my God. Wait, tell us about that quickly, because that's really interesting.
I know that's another feminist dive, isn't it? And people's opinion on Barbie. But so I actually used to be their official real life Barbie for Mattel. So I would travel like the length and breadth of the UK doing appearances as Barbie for children at parties or launch events or anything that there was their branding needed to be in. I was there. And again, Barbie has moved on through the generations, and now her kind of slogan is you can be anything. So it really is trying to encourage women to reach as high as they want with their goals. So I was Barbie for Mattel. I was very, very girly girl. I have a garage filled with Barbie dolls that I was given. So I always imagined having daughters. So 3 sons later, I was
God.
I was like, okay, despite me trying to get them to play with Barbies, nope, they were not interested whatsoever. And then, to be honest, I had a bit of I don't know if you call it like a eureka moment or what it was. There was a moment where I realized that I feel like I've really been given like this gift and this opportunity with 3 boys to bring them into the world as feminist men, especially with my background, having 2 mums myself. I thought, you know what, what an opportunity I have.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'd mentioned with pageants, the great thing is having this platform and a voice to speak and acting as a role model. And for me, it really was to try and encourage other mums to raise their sons as feminists. And that's how my platform started, which is Raising Great Brits Men.
That's amazing. So how can we be better role models to young men and young women in the same breath?
Yeah, well, for me, it was kind of, I mean, it's a learning process for me. I know this is something that I want to do. And I started my own podcast, which is Raising Great Brits Men. And the idea is that over the year of being Ms. Great Britain, I want to speak to people out there who are leaders in this and who can really give encouragement and advice on what to do. Because I know it's so important, and something that I'm really aware of with having sons as well is, you know, that pressure and that sort of toxic masculinity. And this is something for me that I don't want my boys to fall into. And I don't want them to have the pressure of, you know, boys will be more boys, man up. All this sort of aggressive, anti-feminine tones is something that I don't want my boys to have and be brought up as.
And what does toxic masculinity mean to you specifically?
Yeah, I think for me it's like anti femininity really, and it's kind of, you know, aggression, you know, and like I say, those sort of phrases of, you know, man up, and it's something that really does scare me. And I read some fact. It was in one of the books that I've got, because I bought quite a few books on it, and there was something like the biggest killer for men under the age of 40 is male suicide. And it's just so scary. And I think for me, having the 3 boys, that is something that, you know, absolutely obviously terrifies me as a mum.
Yeah.
So I think not only does toxic masculinity, you know, affect women, and I want to bring my boys up as allies to women, to make the world safer for women and children. But I also want to protect them, you know, from themselves as well, and to know that they can speak about emotion, and, you know, to you know, go with their gut instinct and not fall into peer pressure and society pressure.
Do you think it's an education thing from a young age? Is it something that you'd like to see introduced into schooling? Maybe something outside schooling? How do you think we can encourage the next generation to embrace feminism and equality?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that needs to be educated. And this is why I think it's so important to start early on. You know, I do believe that education is the key for bringing up our future generation of, you know, feminist men in the future. And I do think that the schools have a big part to play in it. I mean, I even know from reading like the kids' school books, it's you know, your very typical mom and dad and 2 kids in all the reading books that they've got. There's no inclusion of, you know, same-sex couples, even still in all their school books. And I think, again, that just feeds into that sort of masculine, the dad's at work, the dad's driving the car. And it's just not giving women that equal space. And I think this is the problem. And I was reading a thing on the Women's Aid website itself, and it actually talks about misogyny and how it's really sort of starts from women still being seen as unequal in society. And how it almost makes it impossible then for women to leave domestic abuse relationships, because and hard to be believed, because it almost normalizes that behavior.
Yeah, and normalizes male dominance over females, and it maybe even it comes down to internalized misogyny as well, when those women are feeling like they are worth less than a man, and they do deserve to have power over them from the man in their life that they can't leave.
Yeah, exactly. And it really does put up those barriers that make it hard for, like you say, women to be believed and have that confidence to leave the relationship. And even it just normalizes it. So, you know, I think definitely within schooling, there certainly needs to be more normalizing of, you know, same-sex families, and just speaking as well, really encouraging boys to speak about their feelings.
Yeah.
It's completely normal for girls to get upset and cry, and it's almost like encouraged, if anything. But I still see it now. I mean, my eldest plays rugby, and he'll get really upset on the rugby field.
Yeah.
And interestingly, when I see my friends' little girls get upset, when they're doing sport, it's almost okay for the mum to go over and give them a cuddle. Whereas I feel like whenever I go over to my eldest, who's called Spencer, there's a bit of is he crying again? What's wrong with him? Whereas when it's one of the girls crying on the pitch, they go, oh, is she okay today? And I really hate that. And it's something that really bugs me. He's just very sensitive. I don't know, maybe he's having a bad day. He's like me. He doesn't like being called. So he's like, Mom, it's cold. Do we not have to do this today? So, it's just, I do feel like it needs to be more normalized in schooling, and just talked about more, which is why I wanted to do this Great Brit Men campaign, just to get people chatting, and it's really to just get us thinking. I think it's little small steps that in your own home can make a big impact in society.
And I suppose apart from education, in that story you just told, it sort of comes down to our generation as well to like check ourselves if we are experiencing those feelings of internalized misogyny and expressing them outwardly. So, if you do see someone's kid on the rugby field, like just maybe ask yourself why it bothers you that he's crying. It's checking yourself and like you said, having those conversations not only with other people but internally too.
I do agree. And I also think it's kind of challenging people and having the confidence to challenge people, because as much as I love my father-in-law, he's very old school.
Yeah.
And one of the days that he came to watch and he saw Spencer get upset, he said, oh, it was embarrassing. And I said, embarrassing for who? Embarrassing for you? Because it was embarrassing for me, and I'm his mum, and it wasn't embarrassing for Spencer. So I think it's kind of having the confidence to sort of challenge people and say, well, why? Why is it okay that the girl was crying, but not for the boy to cry? So I think there's so much work to get done, and there's so much in this topic that it can feel, especially for me, very overwhelming, and like I don't know where to start. And this is why I kind of just wanted to be honest and say to other moms, like and dads, hopefully, look, if we've got sons, let's try and do this together. It can't be changed overnight, but if we all can do a few little steps and just make this world safer for women in the future and for men, because I want to protect them from themselves.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and chatting about it. Where can people find you on social, and where can they learn more about raising great Brit men?
So I'm on Instagram, and it's just my name, which is Charlotte Clemie. So on there I do post the odd little thing. I like to read to the kids a lot, and there's some amazing books now that make it really easy to chat to kids. There's one really funny one called Mary Wears Pants, and it's about the first woman to wear trousers who got arrested.
Oh wow.
And it's for children, so it's written in a really good way. And funnily enough, my mum's partner is Mary, so they think that it's written about her, because Mary would definitely always wear trousers, like she would never seen dead in a dress. So they think it's written about her. But and I'll sometimes post like little things that I'm doing like that, and they can be really simple ideas and a good easy way to talk to a 7-year-old about feminism and how it's been, a tough journey for women to get where we are today. So my Instagram's Charlotte Clemie, and then I have got a podcast. There's just one episode on there, and it's called Raising Great Brit Men. So hopefully over the next 9 months I'll be interviewing everybody from other mums of sons to a few authors whose books I've read, and I would really like to interview some men as well and speak
amazing
to them.
Beautiful. Well, I'll pop a link in the episode description to your podcast and to your Instagram. But thank you so much for coming on and chatting to me. It's been brilliant to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Maddie.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with the wonderful Charlotte. Please let me know on my TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, wherever, if you have any stories or thoughts of your own to share. Love and elbow taps. Peace.